thunder crashed like artillery fire against the night sky. The storm wasn't just weather, it was warfare against everything fragile. Inside her modest apartment, Olivia Barrett's calloused hands carefully arranged the collection of worn tools she'd inherited from her grandfather. At 28, she carried the skilled hands of someone who'd spent a lifetime taking engines apart and putting them back together. The local news droned in the background, barely audible over the rain hammering her windows. Mitchell's auto shop closing after 40 years. The words caught her attention, making her stomach tighten. The retirement of Martin Mitchell meant the likely sale of the only steady job she'd managed to hold since moving to Riverdale, Pennsylvania 3 years ago. The shop had been her sanctuary since her grandfather Harold's death, the man who'd raised her after her parents died in a car accident when she was just 7. He taught her not just how to fix engines, but how to navigate life's rough roads. Without Mitchell's, she'd be adrift again in a world where female mechanics were still viewed with skepticism, at best outright dismissal at worst. Her phone rang, the display showing an unfamiliar local number. Wiping her hands on a rag that had long ago surrendered its original color to engine grease, she answered. Hello? Is this Olivia Barrett? The voice belonged to an older woman, authoritative yet kind. Yes, speaking. My name is Helen Wilson, I chair the local Veterans Committee. I have a special job that might interest you. Olivia's curiosity piqued. What kind of job? Walter Thompson is a Vietnam veteran living out on Old Mill Road. He has his father's truck, a 1955 Ford F-100. It's been sitting in his barn for nearly 20 years, but now he wants it restored. What's the catch, Mrs. Wilson? Olivia could hear something in Helen's tone, suggesting there was more to this story. A pause stretched across the line. Walter is difficult. Lost his son Aaron in Iraq about 20 years back. The truck was supposed to be their project together. Walter can be prickly, but that truck means everything to him. You're the only one around these parts who could do it justice. Machines were straightforward, people were complicated, but the prospect of working on a classic F-100 was too tempting to pass up. Besides, with Mitchell retiring soon, she needed all the work she could get. I'll check it out. Olivia agreed, already mentally cataloging what a restoration of that magnitude would require. The next morning, Olivia drove her battered Toyota pickup along winding country roads. Autumn painted the Pennsylvania hills in shades of fire maple trees arched overhead, their leaves creating a tunnel of red and gold that filtered the crisp morning sunlight. The GPS lost signal twice before finally announcing she had reached her destination. The Thompson property appeared around a bend, a weathered white farmhouse with a wraparound porch and a large red barn whose paint had faded to the color of dried blood. The place had good bones but showed signs of neglect. Flower beds that had once been carefully tended now sprouted weeds alongside resilient perennials that refused to surrender to abandonment. Olivia parked and stepped out, her work boots crunching on gravel. The farm had the heavy silence of a place where someone lived alone for too long. No dogs barked at her arrival, no friendly waves from neighbors, just stillness, broken only by the rustle of wind through the trees. The screen door creaked open before she reached the porch steps. A tall man emerged slowly, leaning heavily on a wooden cane. Despite stooped shoulders and the slight tremor in his hand, Walter Thompson carried himself with the squared posture that military life ingrained. His hair was steel gray, face lined with the kind of stubbornness that hill country specialized in producing. He wore faded jeans and a flannel shirt buttoned to the collar despite the mild day. You the mechanic? His voice was gravel and rust, suspicious and unwelcoming. Olivia stood her ground. Yes, sir. Olivia Barrett. Helen Wilson asked me to come by about your Ford. Thompson studied her with narrowed eyes, taking in her oil-stained jeans, work boots, and the calloused hands that marked her as someone familiar with hard work. His gaze lingered on her face as though searching for something, trustworthiness, perhaps, or weakness. Thought they'd send a man, he said matter-of-factly. In the world of engines and restorations, being a woman meant constantly proving herself. She'd learned to let her work speak for her. My grandfather taught me everything about engines before I could drive. I specialize in classics. I've rebuilt 12 engines from the ground up this year alone. She met his gaze steadily. But if you'd prefer someone else, I understand. Something shifted in Thompson's expression, not quite approval, but reassessment. He nodded once sharply, then turned toward the barn without another word. Olivia followed, recognizing the gesture for the grudging acceptance it was. The barn doors groaned as Thompson pulled them open, revealing a cavernous space where dust motes danced in shafts of light that broke through gaps in the wooden walls. The air inside smelled of hay-old motor oil and the particular mustiness that comes from a space long sealed against the outside world. In the center, beneath a faded canvas tarp, sat a vehicle-shaped silhouette. Thompson moved toward it with reverence, his cane tapping a slow rhythm on the packed earth floor. He gripped the edge of the tarp, then hesitated, as though bracing himself for what lay beneath. "This was my daddy's," he said quietly. "He bought it new in '55, worked this farm with it, hauled tobacco fence posts, took us to church every Sunday." His knuckles whitened on the cane. "Gave it to me before I shipped out to Vietnam. Said it would carry me home." With a swift motion that belied his age, Thompson pulled the tarp away. The 1955 Ford F-100 emerged from its shroud like a time capsule. Its once vibrant blue paint had dulled to the color of a forgotten summer sky. Rust crept along the wheel wells and rocker panels like a slow disease. The chrome grille, though tarnished, and still held the proud lines of mid-century American craftsmanship. The truck sat slightly lopsided on four flat tires, its suspension settled unevenly after decades of immobility. The windshield was intact but clouded with years of dust. Through it, Olivia could make out the bench seat, upholstered in cracked leather, a simple dash with analog gauges and a steering wheel, whose original white had yellowed to the color of old ivory. Olivia approached slowly, her expert eye cataloging everything. The cracked leather seats, the spider-webbed glass, the flat tires that had surrendered to gravity long ago. This wasn't just a repair job. This was a resurrection. She opened the driver's door, wincing at the protest of rusted hinges. The interior smelled of old leather dust and faintly of tobacco. Not cigarettes, but the sweet, earthy scent of pipe tobacco that had seeped into the upholstery decades ago. The keys still hung from the ignition, a faded leather tag attached. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to the hood. Thompson nodded, moving to the front of the truck with her. Together, they lifted the heavy steel hood, propping it carefully with the original support rod. The straight-six engine was intact but seized from decades of disuse. Mice had made homes in the air filter housing. Belts had cracked and hoses had hardened into uselessness. Yet beneath the grime and neglect, Olivia saw good bones. "Can you fix it?" Thompson asked, his voice carrying an edge of vulnerability he seemed uncomfortable revealing. Olivia ran her fingers along the engine block, listening to what the machine had to tell her. Every vehicle had its own story, its own particular ailments. This one spoke of abandonment, yes, but also of solid engineering that had simply been waiting for someone to care again. "Yes," she said with certainty. "It'll take time and it won't be cheap. But..." As she leaned in closer to inspect the carburetor, something caught her eye. The fuel line hadn't just deteriorated with age, it had been deliberately cut. And the brake line showed similar signs of tampering. This wasn't just neglect. Someone had intentionally disabled this truck. Olivia glanced at Thompson, who was staring at the vehicle with an expression she couldn't quite read. Without drawing attention to her discovery, she continued her inspection, carefully checking beneath the seats. Her hand brushed against something metal wedged deep under the driver's seat. A military dog tag, rusted and tarnished, the name and details illegible without proper cleaning. Thompson stiffened when she held it up. "That's not mine," he said quickly, "and it's not Aaron's." Before Olivia could ask whose it might be, Thompson took it from her hand and pocketed it with a finality that discouraged questions. "The truck belonged to my father, then to me. Was supposed to go to my boy after..." His voice faltered. "I kept it all these years. Couldn't bring myself to touch it. Now I'm thinking maybe it's time." Olivia nodded, sensing there was much more to the story than a simple restoration project. Every vehicle carried memories, but this one seemed to carry secrets as well. "I'll need to make a list of parts," she said, respecting his need to keep some things private. "Some we can salvage, others we'll need to find." She continued her assessment, noting the condition of each major component. The body had superficial rust but appeared structurally sound, a testament to the quality of American steel from that era. The transmission would need to be disassembled and inspected. The electrical system would require complete rewiring. The brakes, steering, and suspension would all need rebuilding. As they discussed the practicalities of the restoration, the barn door creaked open behind them. A man, about Thompson's age, stepped inside, his weathered face breaking into a smile that didn't quite reach his wary eyes. "Well, I'll be damned," the newcomer said. "You actually did it, Walter. You found someone to wake up this old beast." Thompson's posture changed, subtly straightening, as though in the presence of an old commander. "Victor," he acknowledged with a nod, "this is Olivia Barrett. She's going to see what she can do." Victor Mason moved with the measured gait of someone who'd seen too much combat and carried too many memories. He had the lean, rangy build of a man who had once been powerful and hadn't completely surrendered to age. He offered Olivia a hand calloused from years of labor. "Victor Mason served with Walter in the 173rd Airborne back when we were both young enough to believe we were invincible." Olivia shook his hand, noting the strength still present in his grip. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Mason." Victor circled the truck, whistling low. "Last time I saw this old girl, she was running like a dream. Walter used to take such pride in her." He ran a hand along the fender. Then after Aaron, he stopped abruptly, glancing at Thompson, whose jaw had tightened. "Aaron always loved this truck," Victor continued more carefully. "Said it connected him to his grandfather, to his roots. He had plans for it, didn't he, Walter?" Thompson gave a curt nod but remained silent, his eyes fixed on the Ford as though it might suddenly speak and reveal all its secrets. Victor turned to Olivia. "You know, I might have some of the original service manuals for this model. My brother collected them, and I've got some specialized tools that might help with the restoration. I'll bring them by next time I come." As Victor spoke, his eyes kept drifting to Thompson, watching him with the careful attention of someone monitoring a bomb that might detonate. There was history between these men, complicated, deep, and not entirely resolved. "Aaron was a good kid," Victor said, addressing Olivia, but clearly speaking for Thompson's benefit. "Smart, observant. He noticed things others missed. That's what made him so good in Iraq. He was in intelligence, you know, before—" His voice trailed off. Thompson's knuckles whitened on his cane. "That's enough, Victor." Oh, Victor nodded, respecting the boundary. "Sorry, old friend, just remembering." He turned to Olivia. "Aaron discovered something over there. Something important related to his unit and a private military contractor. Atlas Security Solutions. He was trying to gather evidence when—" Victor stopped as Thompson shot him a warning glance. Olivia pretended to focus on the truck's engine, giving the two men the illusion of privacy while she absorbed every word. Whatever had happened to Aaron Thompson, it clearly wasn't as simple as the official story suggested. Victor reached into his jacket and pulled out a worn leather-bound book. "Found this in my attic. It's the original service manual for this model. Thought it might help." He handed it to Olivia. "And I've got some special tools for working on these old carburetors. They don't make them like this anymore." Olivia accepted the manual gratefully. "This will be incredibly helpful, thank you." As she flipped through the yellowed pages, Victor moved closer to Thompson. "You're doing the right thing," he said quietly. "It's time to let this truck tell its story." Thompson's expression remained unreadable, but he gave a small nod. The manual was comprehensive, covering every aspect of the F-100's mechanics, with detailed illustrations and specifications. As Olivia studied it, Victor shared stories from Vietnam, how he and Thompson had kept their unit's vehicles running with nothing but basic tools and ingenuity. "Once deep in the jungle, our transport broke down. Middle of hostile territory monsoon season. Walter here fashioned a new fan belt out of parachute cord and some rubber from a poncho. Kept that engine cool enough to get us back to base." Thompson snorted. "Would have been easier if you hadn't gotten us lost in the first place." Victor laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to momentarily lift years from both men's faces. "Navigation was never my strong suit." For a brief moment, Olivia glimpsed what these two men must have been like decades ago. Young, resourceful, bound by the particular brotherhood that forms under fire. Then Thompson winced as he shifted his weight, his hand automatically moving to rub his right knee, and the spell was broken. Victor showed Olivia a few tricks for freeing seized engine components, his knowledge impressive for someone who wasn't a professional mechanic. "Learned out of necessity in Vietnam," he explained. "When your transport breaks down in hostile territory, you either fix it or die trying." Olivia took mental notes, recognizing that Victor's techniques, though unconventional, were born of practical experience. He demonstrated how to create a penetrating oil mixture that was more effective than commercial products, using ingredients that could be found in any kitchen. "The secret is patience," he explained, carefully applying the mixture to frozen bolts. "Let it work its way in." Force is the enemy of these old machines. The three worked together for nearly an hour, with Victor demonstrating the techniques and Thompson occasionally offering information about the truck's history. The tension between the two veterans gradually eased as they focused on the mechanical tasks at hand. Thompson recalled how his father had taught him to change the oil in this very truck when he was just 12 years old, standing on a wooden crate to reach the engine. Victor shared stories of the road trips he and Thompson had taken after returning from Vietnam when they were both trying to readjust to civilian life. "This truck got us all the way to the Grand Canyon and back," Victor remembered. Summer of '70, no air conditioning AM radio that picked up nothing but static in the mountains and a cooler full of beer in the back. "And that waitress in Arizona," Thompson added unexpectedly, a ghost of a smile crossing his face. "What was her name, the one with the turquoise earrings?" "Darlene," Victor supplied immediately. "She liked you, but you were too shy to ask for her number." Thompson shook his head. "Wasn't shy, just smart enough to know a desert flower wouldn't transplant well to Kentucky soil." These fragments of their shared past revealed a different Thompson than the bitter, isolated man Olivia had first met. Someone who had once laughed, traveled, noticed pretty waitresses with turquoise earrings. Someone who had lived before grief had calcified around him like the rust on his father's truck. When they finally emerged from the barn, the afternoon sun had begun its descent toward the horizon. Victor and Olivia were discussing the best sources for authentic parts when a sleek black SUV pulled into the driveway, tires crunching aggressively on the gravel. Thompson froze, his entire demeanor shifting from grudging collaboration to alert wariness. Victor, too, straightened his hand instinctively, moving to his hip as though reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. A man in his early 40s stepped out of the SUV. He wore an expensive charcoal suit that seemed out of place in rural Pennsylvania, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. His resemblance to Thompson was subtle but unmistakable. Something in the set of his jaw and the shape of his eyes marked him as family. "Uncle Walter," the man called, his voice carrying a practiced smoothness that suggested courtrooms and corporate boardrooms. "I see you have visitors today. How unusual." Thompson's face hardened. "Nathan," he acknowledged without warmth. "What brings you here? More papers for me to sign." Nathan Thompson approached with the confident stride of someone accustomed to getting his way. His smile remained fixed as his gaze swept over Victor and lingered on Olivia, assessing and dismissing her in the same moment. Up close, Olivia could see the expensive watch on his wrist, the subtle monogram on his shirt cuff, the overall polish of someone whose daily routine included more grooming products than Olivia used in a month. "Just checking on my favorite uncle, making sure you're taking care of yourself." Nathan's words sounded caring, but his tone carried an undercurrent of condescension. "I see you finally decided to do something with Dad's old truck." "Your grandfather's truck," Thompson corrected sharply. "And yes, Miss Barrett here is going to restore it." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Restore it? That seems like a waste of money at your age, Uncle. Wouldn't it be simpler to sell the property and move somewhere more manageable? The offer from the development company still stands. They'd take care of everything, the house, the land, even that old truck." The tension between them crackled like static electricity before a storm. This was clearly an old argument, worn smooth by repetition, but no less heated for it. "This is my home," Thompson said flatly. "I'm not selling to some corporation that wants to turn farmland into vacation homes for people who wouldn't know which end of a cow gives milk." Nathan sighed dramatically. "Always so stubborn, just like Aaron." His eyes narrowed. "Speaking of my dear departed cousin, did you know his old unit is being investigated? Seems there were some irregularities with a private contractor they worked with. Atlas Security Solutions." Thompson went rigid. Victor stepped forward slightly as though placing himself between the two men. "Aaron was looking into those irregularities before he died." Nathan continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "He wasn't suicidal, Uncle Walter. He was scared. Someone threatened him, and instead of coming to me, a lawyer who could have helped, he tried to gather evidence." Olivia watched Thompson's face pale beneath its weathered tan. "That's enough, Nathan," Victor interjected. Nathan turned his attention to Victor, his smile tightening. "Mr. Mason's still hanging around, I see. Tell me, how's retirement treating you? Found any productive hobbies?" Victor didn't respond, but Olivia noticed his jaw clench. Nathan returned his focus to Thompson. "Uncle, I'm only trying to help. This farm is too much for you. The taxes alone are eating away what little savings you have, and now you're spending money on restoring that truck. Be reasonable. My money's my business, Thompson growled. Now state your purpose or leave. Nathan straightened his already impeccable tie. Fine, I came to tell you that there's been an inquiry opened into Aaron's death. New evidence suggests it wasn't suicide, which means someone killed him. His eyes locked with Thompson's. Someone who might have had a reason to silence him. The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. Get off my property, Thompson said, his voice deadly quiet. Nathan held up his hands in mock surrender. Of course I've said what I came to say. He turned to leave but paused when he noticed Olivia watching the exchange. Miss Barrett, was it a word of advice? Be careful what projects you take on. Some restorations uncover things that were meant to stay buried. With that parting shot, Nathan returned to his SUV and drove away, leaving a cloud of dust and tension in his wake. The three stood in silence until the sound of the engine faded. Thompson's breathing was labored, his face ashen. You okay? Victor asked quietly. Thompson nodded once sharply. Just need to sit down a minute. He moved stiffly toward the porch, leaving Olivia and Victor alone. What was that about? Olivia asked in a hushed voice. Victor sighed heavily, suddenly looking every one of his 70 years. Family drama. Nathan's father, Walter's brother, died a few years back. Left Nathan the family law practice and a lot of ambition. He's been trying to get Walter to sell this place for years, but Victor seemed to consider his next words carefully. And Aaron Thompson's son, Olivia, sensed there was more to it than simple real estate. Victor's eyes grew distant. Official story is he committed suicide after returning from his second tour in Iraq. PTSD, it happens. He shook his head. But Aaron wasn't the type. He was investigating something about the private contractor his unit worked with. Said he had evidence of wrongdoing. Victor's voice dropped even lower. A week before he died, he told me he'd hidden something important, something that would blow it all wide open. Then they found him with a bullet in his head and ruled it suicide. Olivia glanced toward the barn, where the Ford F-100 sat in its secrets waiting to be uncovered. And the truck, how does that fit in? That's the thing, Victor said. I don't know, but the day before he died, Aaron came to see it. Spent hours alone in that barn. Walter doesn't know that he was at the VA hospital that day. And I never told him because you didn't want to give him false hope, Olivia finished. Victor nodded. That truck is all Walter has left of both his father and his son. Whatever you find while restoring it, be gentle with how you reveal it. The implications of what Victor was saying settled over Olivia like a heavy blanket. This wasn't just about restoring a classic truck anymore. It was about potentially uncovering evidence in what might be a murder investigation, evidence that powerful people might want to remain hidden. Does Nathan know about Aaron visiting the truck before he died? She asked. Victor's expression darkened. Nathan knows a lot of things he shouldn't. He's got connections, government military contractors. That law firm of his represents some powerful clients, including Atlas Security. Olivia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air. Should I be worried? Victor studied her face for a long moment. Just be careful, and if you find anything, come to me first. Not Walter. Not right away. He's been through enough. After Victor left, Olivia found Thompson sitting on the porch, staring out at the fields as the light began to fade. The land rolled away from the farmhouse in gentle waves, the crops long harvested, leaving only stubble that glowed golden in the late afternoon sun. In the distance, the Appalachian foothills rose in a blue-gray haze, ancient and unchanging. I should be going, she said. I'll make a list of what we need and come back tomorrow to get started if that works for you. Thompson looked up, his eyes focusing on her as though returning from a distant place. Why did you agree to this job? He asked suddenly. Helen must have told you I'm not easy to work with. Olivia considered her answer carefully. My grandfather always said machines have souls. They carry the imprints of the people who love them. This truck has been waiting a long time to run again. I'd like to help it. Something in Thompson's expression softened fractionally. Your grandfather sounds like a wise man. He was, Olivia said simply. He taught me everything I know about engines and about life. Thompson nodded, seeming to come to a decision. Be here at 8 tomorrow. We'll get started. As Olivia drove home through the gathering dusk, her mind raced with questions. What had Aaron discovered in Iraq? What was Nathan's real agenda, and most importantly, what secrets might be hidden within the aging body of that Ford F-100? The road wound through forests where the trees were shedding their autumn finery leaves, spiraling down to carpet the asphalt in crimson and gold. Olivia drove slowly, partly because of the poor condition of her Toyota's brakes, but mostly because she needed time to process everything she had learned today. Aaron Thompson had found something evidence of wrongdoing by a private military contractor. He had hidden that evidence possibly in his father's truck. Then he had died under suspicious circumstances. Now his cousin Nathan, who worked for the very company Aaron had been investigating, was pressuring Walter to sell the farm and the truck. It was no coincidence that after 20 years of neglect, Walter had suddenly decided to restore the F-100. Something had changed. Some new information had come to light. Helen Wilson might know more, but Olivia hesitated to involve her directly. The fewer people who knew what she was looking for, the safer everyone would be. That night, Olivia sat at her small kitchen table, researching the Ford F-100 restoration process on her laptop. But her searches soon drifted to Aaron Thompson, Iraq, Atlas Security Solutions, and military contractor Misconduct Iraq. The results painted a disturbing picture. Atlas Security Solutions had been implicated in several controversies: unauthorized use of force, misappropriation of military supplies, even allegations of arms trafficking. Each time investigations mysteriously ended without conclusions. Several whistleblowers had died under questionable circumstances, officially ruled as accidents or suicides. Olivia found an article about Aaron Thompson, a brief mention in a local paper about his death. The report was sterile and minimal. Aaron Thompson, 27, Army intelligence, died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound, survived by his father, Walter Thompson. No services by request. Something about the terse announcement felt wrong, as though the real story had been deliberately obscured. Olivia dug deeper, searching for information about Aaron's unit. Several members had died in the years following their deployment car accidents, drug overdoses, suicides. The statistical improbability was striking. She searched for information on Nathan Thompson, finding only the professional biography on his law firm's website. Princeton undergraduate, Harvard Law, specializing in corporate defense and government contracts. His client list was impressive but vague. Multinational corporations, government contractors, defense industry leaders. No specific mention of Atlas Security Solutions, but that didn't mean anything. Law firms often kept their most controversial clients off their public-facing materials. Olivia's apartment was small, one-bedroom, a kitchenette, and a living area barely large enough for a couch and the coffee table that currently served as her desk. The walls were thin enough that she could hear her neighbor's television, the dialogue from some crime drama, providing an ironic soundtrack to her research. As midnight approached, Olivia compiled a comprehensive list of parts needed for the truck restoration, trying to focus on the mechanical challenge ahead rather than the mystery surrounding it. But the image of Thompson's face when Nathan mentioned Aaron's death kept intruding on her thoughts. Finally, exhaustion overtook curiosity, and Olivia closed her laptop. In the bathroom, she washed the day's grime from her hands, the strong degreaser turning the water a murky gray. Her reflection in the mirror showed smudges of oil still on her forehead and cheek. Dark circles had formed under her eyes, testaments to too many late nights and early mornings. Olivia Barrett had never considered herself particularly brave or adventurous. She fixed machines, not problems. She restored what was broken, not what was lost. Yet somehow she had stumbled into a mystery that might have already cost one man his life. As she lay in bed, the weight of that responsibility pressed down on her. Aaron Thompson had died trying to expose whatever secrets he had discovered. Walter Thompson had spent 20 years grieving his son, unable to move forward. And now Olivia held the keys, perhaps literally, to unlocking the truth. Sometimes the most important things we fix aren't made of metal and rubber. Sometimes they're the broken pieces of truth that lie scattered across years of silence and grief. For Olivia Barrett, the journey ahead would require all her mechanical skill and courage she didn't yet know she possessed. The morning arrived with the crisp clarity that only October in Pennsylvania can deliver. Olivia arrived at the Thompson farm early, her truck loaded with initial supplies, and her mind filled with questions she wasn't sure she should ask. Some truths are like engines: disassemble them carelessly, and you might never get them running again. Walter was waiting on the porch, 2 mugs of coffee steaming in the cool air. His nod of greeting was marginally warmer than yesterday's. Progress comes in small increments, Olivia thought, like restoring an engine one careful part at a time. The barn felt different in the morning light, less a mausoleum and more a workshop awaiting purpose. The Ford F-100 sat patiently as though it had been waiting all these years for someone to uncover its secrets. "Where do we start?" Walter asked, setting his coffee on a workbench and gripping his cane with both hands. Olivia pulled on her work gloves, surveying the truck with professional assessment. "First, we document everything. Take photos, notes, measurements. Then we'll remove the body from the frame. It's the only way to do a proper restoration." As they worked through the morning, Olivia showed Walter how to properly photograph each component before removal, explaining the restoration process step by step. His hands, though stiffened by age and arthritis, still remembered the tools they had once wielded with confidence. When he struggled with a particularly stubborn bolt, Olivia pretended not to notice, busying herself with another task until he managed on his own. "You remind me of Aaron," Walter said, suddenly breaking a long silence. He had that same patience with machines, like they were puzzles to be solved, not obstacles to be conquered. Olivia glanced up, surprised by the personal observation. "My grandfather used to say that force was the last resort of the incompetent mechanic. Engines respond better to understanding than to brute strength." A ghost of a smile touched Walter's lips. "Your grandfather and my son would have gotten along." By midday, they had made good progress documenting the truck's condition. Olivia worked methodically, but her attention was divided, one part focused on the legitimate restoration, another searching for any hiding places where Aaron might have concealed evidence. As Walter went to the house to prepare lunch, Olivia carefully examined the underside of the dashboard, finding nothing unusual. The glove compartment contained only the original owner's manual and maintenance records, meticulously kept until 20 years ago, when entries abruptly stopped. It was when she removed the bench seat that Olivia made her first real discovery. The seat mounting bolts showed scratch marks inconsistent with factory installation. Someone had removed and replaced this seat relatively recently. Examining the seat frame more closely, Olivia found a cleverly disguised compartment that had been added after manufacture. Her heart raced as she reached inside and extracted a small USB drive wrapped in protective plastic and electrical tape. She quickly pocketed the device just as Walter's uneven footsteps approached the barn door. Whatever Aaron had discovered, part of it might now be in her pocket, and with it perhaps the real reason he had died. The next day, Victor joined them, bringing specialized tools and additional service manuals. As the three worked on removing the engine, Victor shared more stories about Aaron, carefully watching Walter's reactions. "Did you know Aaron's unit was stationed near Fallujah during his second tour?" Victor asked, addressing Olivia but watching Walter. His job was analyzing intel on local insurgent groups, but he was also tracking supply movements, military logistics, who was getting what weapons and from where. Walter remained focused on loosening a particularly stubborn motor mount bolt. His silence spoke volumes, but Victor continued undeterred. He noticed discrepancies, weapons shipments that never reached their intended destinations, military supplies showing up in insurgent hands. At first, he thought it was just poor record-keeping, maybe some low-level corruption. "Victor," Walter warned, still not looking up. "He needs to know what he found, Walter," Victor said gently. "What he died for." "We don't know that's why he died," Walter snapped, finally looking up. The pain in his eyes was raw, undiminished by the 20 years that had passed. "Walter," Victor said softly, "the official investigation was a joke. 2 days of questioning by MPs who'd already decided it was suicide, followed by a closed file. They didn't even test for gunpowder residue on his hands." Olivia worked quietly, giving the men space for this conversation while listening intently. The emotional weight in the barn was heavier than any engine block she'd ever lifted. "He called me the night before he died," Victor continued, "said he had proof of Atlas Security selling American weapons to both sides of the conflict. Said he'd documented everything and hidden it where only you would think to look." Walter's hands stilled on the wrench. "Why didn't you tell me this 20 years ago?" "Because you weren't ready to hear it," Victor said simply. "You were drowning in grief, Walter. And because I was afraid they'd come after you too." The silence that followed was broken only by the distant call of crows in the fields. Finally, Walter spoke, his voice rough with emotion. "If my boy was murdered, I have a right to know. That's why we're here now," Victor said. "That's why this truck needs to run again." The atmosphere in the barn shifted subtly after that conversation, taking on the focused intensity of a mission. They weren't just restoring a vehicle anymore, they were excavating the truth layer by painstaking layer. When they finally managed to separate the engine from the transmission, Olivia spotted something unusual, a modification to the bell housing that shouldn't have been there. A small compartment had been welded into the housing nearly invisible unless you knew exactly what to look for. "Walter," she called. "Victor, I think I've found something." The two men gathered around as Olivia pointed out the modification. "That's Aaron's work," Walter said immediately. "He was always good with a welder, better than me even as a teenager." With careful precision, they opened the compartment to reveal a flash drive similar to the one Olivia had already found, along with a small notebook wrapped in plastic. Walter's hands trembled as he reached for the items. "These are Aaron's," he confirmed, recognizing his son's handwriting on the notebook's cover. They retreated to the farmhouse, the found items placed carefully on the kitchen table like fragile artifacts. Walter's ancient desktop computer took several minutes to boot up the outdated operating system, wheezing to life. The flash drive was password protected. "Any idea what the password might be?" Olivia asked. Walter stared at the screen, the blue light reflecting in his eyes. "Try Elizabeth 960, he said after a moment. "Your wife?" Victor asked. Walter nodded. "Aaron's mother." Olivia typed in the password, but the system rejected it. "Maybe something else personal to Aaron," she suggested. Walter thought for a moment. "Grandpa Ford 1955. The screen flickered, and then folders began appearing, dozens of files meticulously organized by date and subject. Aaron Thompson had been thorough in his documentation. There were spreadsheets tracking weapons shipments, photographs of crates being loaded onto unmarked trucks, scanned copies of falsified manifests, and audio recordings of conversations between Atlas security personnel and military officials. "My God," Victor whispered as they scrolled through the evidence. The kid built a complete case. But it was the notebook that contained the most damning information. In neat, precise handwriting, Aaron had documented meetings, conversations, and his own observations, building a narrative of systematic corruption that reached high into both military command and government contracting. One name appeared repeatedly throughout Aaron's notes: Nathan Thompson. Walter's hands clenched into fists as he read his son's accounts of how his own cousin had facilitated illegal weapons transfers, falsified paperwork, and directly profited from the diversion of military supplies to insurgent groups. Nathan, Walter said the name like poison on his tongue. My own brother's son. Olivia studied Aaron's notebook closely, paying particular attention to the final entries. 3 days before his death, Aaron had written, "And warned me today. Said I was swimming too deep and would find only sharks. Told him I have copies of everything. Insurance, he knows what I mean. Need to secure final package at the farm tomorrow." "He came here," Victor confirmed. "The day before he died when you were at the VA. And now Nathan wants me to sell this place." Walter said, the full implications dawning on him, and he's been pushing for years, offering more and more money. He doesn't want the farm, he wants to make sure whatever else Aaron hid here never sees the light of day. The three sat in silence, absorbing the weight of what they'd discovered. Aaron Thompson had uncovered a massive criminal conspiracy, documented it meticulously, and hidden the evidence where he thought it would be safe. And then he had died not by his own hand, but murdered to keep his discovery secret. And now, 20 years later, they had uncovered only part of what he had hidden. "There must be more," Walter said finally. "Aaron wouldn't have put all his eggs in one basket. He was too smart for that." "The notebook mentions a final package," Olivia pointed out, "and he specifically came to the farm to hide it. If it's not in this truck, where else would he have hidden something?" Victor wondered. Walter's eyes narrowed in thought. "Aaron and I used to have a spot when he was a boy, a hiding place where we'd leave messages for each other. Little treasures. It was our secret." "Where?" Victor asked. Walter shook his head. "That's between me and my boy." Later that afternoon, as Victor headed home with copies of the files they'd found, Walter led Olivia to the old oak tree that stood at the edge of the property. "This was our special place," he said, approaching a massive oak that must have been 200 years old. "Aaron would climb up to that fork." He pointed to a spot about 15 feet up. "And we'd hide things in the hollow." Olivia looked up at the towering tree. "Would you like me to check?" Walter seemed about to refuse, then nodded, acknowledging the limitations of his aged body. "Be careful. That tree's older than the Constitution." Olivia approached the climb methodically, testing each branch before trusting it with her full weight. The bark was rough against her hands, the familiar texture grounding her as she ascended. Her grandfather had taught her to climb trees almost before she could walk, a skill she'd never imagined would be useful in her adult life. Reaching the fork, Walter had indicated, Olivia found the hollow, a perfect natural hiding spot, invisible from the ground. Inside was a small metal box, weather-beaten but intact. She carefully retrieved it and made her way back down. Walter's hands shook as he took the box from her. "This wasn't here when I checked it after his death," he said quietly. "I looked everywhere." "Maybe he hid it afterward," Olivia suggested, "the day before he died when Victor saw him here." Walter nodded slowly, then opened the box. Inside was a key with a numbered tag and a slip of paper with an address in Riverdale, the location of First Federal Bank. "A safe deposit box," Walter said. "Clever boy." The following morning, Olivia picked up Walter in her truck, and they drove into town together. The bank was a solid brick building on Main Street, its architecture suggesting stability and permanence. Inside, Walter presented the key and his identification to a teller who escorted them to the safe deposit box room. "This box hasn't been accessed in almost 20 years, Mr. Thompson," the manager commented as she helped them locate the correct drawer. "We were actually considering contacting you about it." Walter merely nodded, his focus entirely on what they might find. The manager left them alone with the bond, which Walter opened with trembling hands. Inside was a sealed envelope addressed simply, "Dad," a microcassette tape, and a folder containing what appeared to be photographs and documents. Walter opened the envelope first, unfolding a handwritten letter. As he read, tears welled in his eyes and began tracking down his weathered cheeks. Without a word, he handed the letter to Olivia. "Dad," the letter began, "if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it home. I've uncovered something big, corruption that goes all the way to the top of Atlas Security and involves people we thought we could trust, including Nathan. I've gathered evidence and left copies in various places, including with the JAG officer I trust, and in the truck's hidden compartments. They're watching me now. I've been followed, my quarters searched. I've made contingency plans, but if anything happens to me, do not trust the official story. I'm not suicidal, Dad. I'm angry, and I'm determined to expose what they're doing. I love you, and I'm sorry for the burden this will place on you. But the truth matters. It's worth fighting for. Worth dying for if necessary. Your son, Aaron." Olivia carefully refolded the letter, her throat tight with emotion for a man she'd never met, but whose principles resonated with her own. Aaron Thompson had been willing to risk everything to expose corruption and save lives. And it had cost him his life. The photographs in the folder showed weapons exchanges, crates being loaded onto trucks bearing Atlas security markings, and individuals whose faces Aaron had helpfully circled and identified with sticky notes. Nathan appeared in several images, always in the background, always watching. The microcassette contained a recording of a conversation between Nathan and someone identified only as General. They discussed the removal of obstacles and the need to contain the situation. While never explicitly mentioning Aaron, the implications were clear. "This is it," Walter said, his voice steady despite the tears still shining in his eyes. "This is what they killed him for." Back at the farm, they carefully organized all the evidence they gathered, the flash drives, notebook, photographs, and recording. The picture they painted was damning. Security had been diverting American weapons and supplies to insurgent groups in Iraq, profiting from both sides of the conflict. Nathan Thompson had facilitated the legal paperwork, ensuring oversight committees saw only what Atlas wanted them to see. And when Aaron had threatened to expose it all, they had silenced him. "What do we do now?" Olivia asked. "Take this to the authorities." Walter's expression hardened. What authorities? The military ruled his death a suicide without a proper investigation. Local police won't touch something this big. And from what Aaron uncovered, there are people in the federal government involved in this too. "There must be someone we can trust," Olivia insisted. Walter and Olivia were still discussing their options when the sound of tires on gravel announced a visitor. Through the window, they saw Helen Wilson's sensible sedan pull up to the house. Helen entered with the air of someone carrying important news. "Walter, Olivia, I'm glad you're both here. I've been making some calls about Aaron's case." Walter looked at her sharply. "What do you mean?" Helen settled into a kitchen chair. "I have a contact at the Department of Justice, Rachel Lawson. She specializes in contractor fraud cases. When you mentioned Atlas Security the other day, it rang a bell. Rachel's been trying to build a case against them for years, but witnesses keep disappearing or recanting. Olivia and Walter exchanged looks. We've found evidence, Olivia said carefully. A lot of it. Helen's eyes widened. In the truck, and elsewhere, Walter confirmed. Aaron left a trail that only now we're following. Helen absorbed this information, then nodded decisively. Rachel can be here tomorrow. She'll bring the full weight of the Justice Department with her. This could finally break open the case she's been building. Walter seemed to age a decade before their eyes, the weight of 20 years of grief and unanswered questions visible in the slump of his shoulders. I just want the truth about my boy to come out. It will, Helen promised, but we need to be careful. If Nathan and his Atlas connections realize what we've found, they'll move to contain the situation just like they did with Aaron. That evening, Olivia stayed at the farm, unwilling to leave Walter alone with the evidence they'd uncovered. The gravity of their discoveries had created a bond between them, one forged from shared purpose and the peculiar intimacy that comes from jointly uncovering long-buried truths. They worked late into the night on the truck, the mechanical tasks providing a soothing counterpoint to the emotional turmoil of the day's revelations. The methodical work of restoration cleaning, parts assessing damage, planning repairs, offered a framework of order in the chaos of conspiracy and murder. Olivia was examining the truck's frame when she noticed another anomaly, a section of the chassis that had been cut and rewelded with expert precision. Walter, she called, I think I've found something else. Together they examined the modification. It was Aaron's work again, the same meticulous welding pattern they'd seen in the other hidden compartments. He created a hollow section in the frame rail, Olivia explained. It wouldn't affect the structural integrity, but it would provide a perfect hiding place. Using a small inspection camera borrowed from Walter's toolbox, they explored the inside of the frame rail. There was definitely something inside a metal tube of some kind, securely wedged into the hollow. We'll need to cut access points, Olivia decided. I can do it without compromising the frame, but it'll take precision work. By midnight, they had carefully cut an opening in the frame rail. Inside was a slim metal tube, military grade, and waterproof, the kind used to protect important documents in combat zones. Walter extracted it with trembling hands. This is military issue, he said, examining the container. Aaron had one for his deployment documents. Inside the tube was another roll of microfilm and a small key with no identifying marks, different from the bank key they'd already used. The microfilm contained something entirely different from what they'd already discovered, photographs, dozens of them, showing weapons transfers at remote desert locations, men in military and civilian clothing unloading crates from trucks. In several images, Nathan Thompson was clearly visible directing operations while holding a clipboard. More damning were the photographs of meetings in hotel rooms and restaurants, showing Nathan with military officers and men identified in Aaron's notes as insurgent leaders. These weren't just weapons transfers, they were deals with both sides of the conflict. My God, Walter whispered, they were arming everyone, military, insurgents, anyone who could pay or further their interests. Olivia added, studying a particularly clear image of Nathan shaking hands with a man whose face had been circled in Aaron's photographs. The small key remained a mystery. It was too small for a padlock, more like a key for a safety deposit box or a locker. With no identifying marks, they had no way to determine what it might open. Victor joined them the next morning, his reaction to the new microfilm one of grim satisfaction. This ties Nathan directly to the operations, he said, not just as legal counsel, but as an active participant. But what's the key for, Olivia wondered. Victor examined it carefully. Looks like a safety deposit box key. Aaron might have secured additional evidence somewhere. But where, Walter asked. What bank? Could be anywhere, Victor admitted. Aaron traveled to Riverdale and Pittsburgh regularly after his discharge. Said he was job hunting, but he was building his case. Walter nodded, setting up fallback plans. Olivia thought about Aaron's methodical approach, the careful way he had hidden evidence in multiple locations within the truck. He wouldn't have made it impossible to figure out. He wanted this evidence found, but only by the right people. There might be a clue in his papers, Victor suggested, something we overlooked. They returned to Aaron's notebook, poring over entries from his final months. Most were observations about Atlas operations, but occasionally he mentioned personal errands, a dentist appointment in Pittsburgh, dinner with a friend in Riverdale, a visit to his mother's grave in Oakwood Cemetery. Wait, Olivia said, pointing to an entry from 3 weeks before Aaron's death. Look at this. The entry read, Mom's birthday, left flowers, also secured package at First National. Access info in usual place. First National Bank, Walter said. They have branches in Pittsburgh and Riverdale. And here in town, Victor added, it's the second largest bank in the county. But what's the usual place? Olivia wondered. Where would Aaron have left access information? Walter's expression shifted as realization dawned. Elizabeth's grave. That's what left flowers means. He must have hidden something at his mother's gravesite. The Oakwood Cemetery was a small, well-maintained plot of land adjacent to the Methodist church on the edge of town. Even in the gathering twilight, Walter had no trouble locating his wife's grave, a modest headstone beneath a spreading maple tree. Olivia and Victor hung back, giving him a moment of privacy as he stood before the marker. After a respectful pause, Walter beckoned them forward. Elizabeth always loved puzzles, he said quietly. She taught Aaron to love them too. If he left a message here, it would be something only I would understand. Walter examined the headstone, carefully running his fingers along the edges and base. Finding nothing, he knelt and inspected the small brass vase attached to the side of the marker. Here, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Removing the vase, he revealed a small waterproof container wedged into the bracket. Inside was a piece of paper with a series of numbers, 35, 17, 4208. A combination, Victor said. For a safety deposit box, Olivia confirmed. But which branch, Walter wondered. Has to be here in town, Victor decided. Aaron would have known you rarely travel to the cities. He'd want to make it accessible to you. They agreed to visit the local First National branch first thing in the morning. As they walked back to their vehicles, Olivia noticed a sedan parked across from the cemetery, its headlights off. When Victor's truck started up, the sedan's lights came on and it pulled away smoothly. We're being watched, she said quietly. Victor nodded. Probably have been since Nathan's visit. We'll need to be careful tomorrow. Back at the farm, Helen called with news that Rachel Lawson would arrive the following afternoon. She's bringing a federal marshal with her, Helen reported. The evidence you've found has her very interested. This could be the break she's been waiting for. That night, Olivia again stayed at the farm, sleeping in the guest room that had once been Aaron's. The room was a time capsule, military awards on the wall, books on the shelf, a high school baseball trophy on the desk. Walter had changed nothing in 20 years, as though preserving the space might somehow keep his son's memory alive. Lying in Aaron's bed, surrounded by the artifacts of his truncated life, Olivia felt an almost overwhelming responsibility. She had stumbled into this family's tragedy, and now she was part of their quest for justice. It was far beyond replacing a carburetor or rebuilding a transmission. This was about restoring something far more precious than an old truck. It was about restoring truth and perhaps in some small way, peace to a father who had lost everything. Morning brought a sense of anticipation. Today, they would potentially uncover the final piece of Aaron's evidence, and Rachel Lawson would arrive to initiate federal proceedings. After 20 years, justice for Aaron Thompson might finally be within reach. Walter seemed energized, moving with greater purpose than Olivia had seen before. His eyes were clear and focused, the weight of uncertainty partially lifted from his shoulders. Knowing his son had been murdered was a terrible truth, but it was better than the lie that had haunted him for 2 decades that Aaron had taken his own life. They arrived at First National Bank just as it opened. Walter approached the teller, explaining that he needed access to the safety deposit boxes. When asked for his key, he produced the small key they had found in the metal tube. The bank manager, a woman in her 50s, with a professional demeanor and compassionate eyes, personally escorted them to the safety deposit box room. Mr. Thompson, she said kindly, it's good to see you again. It's been quite some time. Walter nodded absently, his focus entirely on the task at hand. The manager helped them locate the box corresponding to the key and combination, then left them in privacy. Walter's hands trembled slightly as he inserted the key and dialed the combination. The lock clicked open and he carefully removed the box and placed it on the viewing table. Inside was another sealed envelope with Dad written on it in Aaron's neat handwriting, along with a USB drive and what appeared to be a microcassette tape similar to the one they'd found in the other safety deposit box. Walter opened the envelope first, unfolding a single sheet of paper. Unlike the previous letter, this one was brief and direct. Dad, if you're reading this, you've found my other caches. This is the final piece recorded conversations between Nathan and General Phillips discussing the weapons diversion program and specifically what to do about me. The original is with JAG Officer William Mercer at Fort Benning, but if you're reading this, they've probably gotten to him too. Trust no one except Victor and Helen. They'll know what to do. I love you. Aaron. Walter passed the letter to Olivia, his expression grim. He knew they might come after him. And he prepared accordingly, Victor said, made sure the child would come out one way or another. The microcassette would need a special player, not something commonly found in 2023. But the USB drive was accessible. They thanked the bank manager and left, agreeing to meet back at the farm to review the new evidence before Rachel Lawson arrived. As they pulled out of the bank parking lot, Olivia noticed the same sedan from the cemetery parked across the street. The driver was speaking into a cell phone, watching them intently. "We're definitely being followed," she said quietly to Walter, who was riding with her. Walter's jaw tightened. "Nathan, or someone working for him," Olivia agreed. "Either way, we need to be careful." They took a circuitous route back to the farm, making several unnecessary turns to confirm they were being followed. The sedan maintained its distance, but remained behind them consistently. "Head to the sheriff's office," Walter suggested. "Let's see if they follow us there." The ploy worked. As Olivia turned toward the county sheriff's department, the sedan abruptly turned down a side street and disappeared. "They don't want official attention," Walter observed. "That tells us something." When they finally re-entered the farm, Victor was already waiting in his truck, parked behind the barn, rather than in its usual spot by the house. "Noticed we had company," he explained. "Thought it best to be less obvious." Inside, they gathered around Walter's ancient computer to examine the contents of the new USB drive. It contained audio files, dozens of them, each labeled with dates and brief descriptions. Walter clicked on one labeled Nathan Phillips Contingency Plan. The recording was scratchy, but clear enough to make out two distinct voices. Nathan's smooth, educated tones and another man's deeper, more authoritative voice. "The Thompson situation needs to be contained," the deeper voice, presumably General Phillips, was saying. "He's making noise about going to the Inspector General." "I've spoken to him," Nathan replied. "Tried to make him see reason. He's not listening." "Then more direct measures may be necessary," Phillips said. "We can't risk exposure, not with the Fallujah operation so close." "He's my cousin," Nathan protested, though his objections sounded perfunctory at best. "And he's a threat to national security," Phillips countered. "Sometimes sacrifices must be made for the greater good." "What exactly are you suggesting?" Nathan asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Nothing specific," Phillips replied smoothly. "Just that problems like this have a way of solving themselves when the right pressure is applied. Your job is to ensure that if anything happens, the investigation follows the appropriate narrative." "Suicide," Nathan said. It wasn't a question. "Tragic but not uncommon among returning veterans." Phillips agreed. "PTSD is a terrible affliction." Walter stopped the recording, his face ashen. "They planned it," he whispered. "They planned Aaron's murder in the cover-up." "And we have it on tape," Victor said grimly. Nathan's voice clear as day, discussing how to make Aaron's murder look like suicide. The implications were staggering. Not just weapons trafficking and corruption, but conspiracy to commit murder involving a high-ranking military officer and a prominent attorney. The evidence Aaron had painstakingly gathered and hidden was more than enough to bring down Atlas Security and everyone involved in their illegal operations, including his own cousin. "Rachel Lawson needs to hear this immediately," Olivia said. "This goes beyond contractor fraud. This is premeditated murder." As if on cue, Helen's car pulled into the driveway, followed by an unmarked government sedan. Rachel Lawson had arrived. Introductions were brief and businesslike. Rachel Lawson was a formidable woman in her 50s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing, and the contained energy of someone who had spent a career building cases methodically, brick by brick. The federal marshal accompanying her, Agent Davis, was younger, but carried himself with the quiet confidence of law enforcement. "Helen has briefed me on the basics," Rachel said once they were all seated in Walter's living room. "But I need to see everything you've found, from the beginning." For the next hour, they laid out all the evidence they had discovered, the flash drives from the truck's hidden compartments, The notebook, the photographs, and finally the damning audio recordings that explicitly discussed Aaron's murder. Rachel took meticulous notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly listening intently. When they had finished presenting everything, she sat back, her expression grim but satisfied. "This is exactly what we've been looking for," she said. "Atlas Security has been on our radar for years, but they're slippery, well-connected, and with friends in high places. Every time we've gotten close, witnesses disappear or evidence goes missing." "Will it be enough?" Walter asked the question, heavy with 2 decades of waiting. Rachel nodded firmly. "More than enough. The audio recordings alone constitute conspiracy to commit murder. Combined with the financial records and photographic evidence of weapons transfers, we have a solid RICO case against Atlas and everyone involved, including your nephew." Walter's expression was complex relief mingled with grief, vindication shadowed by the knowledge that his own brother's son had been complicit in Aaron's murder. "What happens now?" Olivia asked. "Now we move quickly," Rachel replied. "I've already initiated the paperwork for federal warrants. By tomorrow morning, we'll be ready to move on Atlas headquarters and arrest Nathan Thompson and General Phillips." She turned to Walter, her professional demeanor softening slightly. "Mr. Thompson, after 20 years, your son will finally receive justice, and his name will be cleared. The official record will reflect that he was murdered in the line of duty, not that he took his own life." Walter nodded, unable to speak, tears welling in his eyes. As Rachel and Agent Davis prepared to leave with copies of all the evidence, she paused at the door. "One more thing until we execute these warrants. All of you need to be extremely careful. Atlas has resources and connections. If they realize what's happening, they might take desperate action. We've already been followed." Olivia informed her that at the cemetery yesterday and at the bank this morning. Rachel's expression hardened. "Then we need to move even faster than I thought. Agent Davis will remain here tonight as protection. I'll have additional marshals en route within the hour." After Rachel left to expedite the warrants, the atmosphere in the farmhouse was charged with nervous anticipation. 2 decades of secrets had been unearthed, evidence meticulously gathered and preserved by a son who had known he might not live to see justice done. Now finally the truth was emerging into the light. Agent Davis performed a security sweep of the property, checking sightlines and potential vulnerabilities. "The house is fairly defensible," he reported. "Limited approaches, good visibility, but I'd feel better if we had everyone in one location tonight." "We can use the storm cellar," Walter suggested. "Concrete walls, steel door. My father built it to double as a bomb shelter during the Cold War." As dusk settled over the farm, they made preparations. Victor would stay as additional security. Helen went home to pack an overnight bag, promising to return within the hour. Olivia and Walter gathered the original evidence, ensuring everything was properly organized for the federal team that would arrive in the morning. The sun had just disappeared behind the hills when they heard the first vehicle approaching, fast, too fast for the rutted farm driveway. Agent Davis moved to the window, hand instinctively going to his sidearm. "That's not Helen," he said tensely. "Black SUV, multiple occupants." Through the gathering darkness, they could see the vehicle that had pulled up in front of the house, the same model as Nathan's, but with darkened windows that concealed the occupants. "Get to the cellar," Davis ordered. "Now, I'll hold them off." Walter led Olivia and Victor toward the kitchen, where the entrance to the storm cellar was located. Behind them, they heard the sound of car doors opening, followed by Davis's voice calling out an official warning. Then came the unmistakable crack of gunfire. The gunshot galvanized them into action. Victor pulled Walter down as bullets shattered the front windows, glass exploding across the living room floor. Olivia clutched the waterproof bag containing all their evidence as she crawled toward the kitchen. "Go," Agent Davis shouted, returning fire from behind an overturned coffee table. "I'll cover you." The kitchen seemed miles away, each foot of hardwood floor a dangerous expanse to cross as bullets tore through walls and furniture. Victor reached the doorway first, pulling Walter alongside him. Olivia followed, her heart hammering against her ribs. The storm cellar entrance was hidden beneath a large braided rug, a heavy wooden door with a cast-iron ring handle. Victor yanked it open as more gunfire erupted from the front of the house. "Get down there," he commanded, helping Walter onto the steep stairs. "Olivia, you next." The cellar was cold and dark, smelling of earth and concrete. Walter fumbled for the light switch, illuminating a space that looked like a relic from the 1960s, metal shelving, stocked with canned goods, Water jugs, emergency supplies, and an old ham radio. The walls were solid concrete, the door reinforced steel. Victor pulled the door shut behind them, sliding 3 heavy bolts into place. "Your father didn't mess around," he told Walter as he examined the fortified entrance. "He lived through the Cuban Missile Crisis." Walter replied, his voice steadier than Olivia expected. Said he'd never be caught unprepared again. Above them, the gunfight continued, muffled pops and the occasional shout. Then came the sound of breaking glass, followed by a heavier explosion that shook dust from the ceiling. Flashbang grenade. Victor identified as military training evident. Professional hit team. These aren't local thugs, Olivia realized. Nathan sent contractors, mercenaries. Atlas Security, Bastillon, Walter confirmed grimly. Aaron was right all along. Olivia checked her phone, no signal underground. The landline that ran to the house would be their only communication option, but using it meant opening the cellar door. "We're cut off," she said. "We have to assume Agent Davis is down and help isn't coming." "Helen?" Walter remembered suddenly. "She's on her way back." The thought sent a chill through Olivia. Helen would be driving straight into an ambush. "We need to warn her," she said. Victor shook his head. "We can't risk opening that door. Our only chance is to stay put until Rachel realizes something's wrong and sends backup." "That could be hours," Walter argued. "Helen could be here any minute." Their debate was cut short by the sound of heavy footsteps directly overhead, moving methodically through the kitchen. Someone was searching the house room by room. They froze, barely breathing, as the footsteps moved across the floor above them. Then came a sound that made Olivia's blood run cold, the scrape of furniture being moved aside. They had found the rug covering the cellar entrance. Victor silently motioned them toward the back of the cellar, away from the door. Walter pointed to a small alcove partially hidden by shelving, a space just large enough for 2 people to squeeze into. "Old coal chute," he whispered, "leads to the outside. Hasn't been used in 50 years. The sound of metal scraping against metal told them the intruders were trying to force the bolts. The cellar door was strong, but it wouldn't hold forever against determined attackers with the right tools. "Go," Victor urged, pulling a revolver from an ankle holster Olivia hadn't noticed before. "I'll hold them here." "Victor," Walter began. "No arguments, old friend. Aaron was like a son to me, too. This is for him." Olivia thrust the evidence bag into Walter's hands. "This needs to reach Rachel. It's what Aaron died for." Walter nodded, his eyes conveying what words couldn't: gratitude, grief, determination. Then he turned and led Olivia toward the hidden alcove. The coal chute was narrow and pitch black, a claustrophobic tunnel that angled upward toward fresh air. Decades of disuse had left it dusty but intact. Walter went first, moving with surprising agility for a man his age. Necessity and adrenaline overcoming arthritic joints. Behind them, they heard the cellar door give way with a metallic screech, followed by Victor's commanding voice. "Federal agents, drop your weapons!" Then gunfire, 3 shots in rapid succession, followed by a 4th, heavier report that could only be Victor's revolver. Olivia fought the urge to turn back. Victor had given them a chance. They couldn't waste it. The coal chute emerged behind the barn, hidden by overgrown bushes. Walter pushed aside the rusted metal cover, and they crawled out into the cold night air. The house was illuminated by harsh floodlights, 3 black SUVs parked haphazardly in the driveway. Armed men in tactical gear moved in practice formations, securing the perimeter. "This way," Walter whispered, leading Olivia toward the wooded area behind the property. "There's an old hunting trail. If we can reach it, we might make it to the Marshall place, 3 miles through the woods." They had just reached the tree line when headlights appeared on the access road, a car approaching the farm. "Helen." "No." Olivia breathed, watching in horror as the sedan drove straight toward the ambush. But something unexpected happened. As Helen's car approached, the tactical team scattered, taking defensive positions. When the sedan stopped, a tall figure emerged, not Helen but Nathan Thompson, impeccably dressed despite the late hour. "He's running the operation personally," Walter whispered, his voice tight with betrayal and rage. From their hiding place, they watched as Nathan surveyed the scene, speaking into a radio and gesturing toward the house. 2 of his men approached, dragging someone between them. "Victor," Olivia gasped, recognizing the bloodied but still conscious form of their friend. Walter's hand clamped down on her arm when she instinctively moved to help. "We can't," he said, anguish in every syllable. "Not if we want any of this to matter." Nathan approached Victor, speaking words they couldn't hear from this distance. Victor's response, whatever it was, earned him a backhanded strike across the face. "We need to go," Walter said, finally pulling Olivia deeper into the woods. Victor knew the risks. He's buying us time. The forest was dark and disorienting, but Walter moved with the confidence of someone who had hunted these woods for decades. He knew every deer trail and creek crossing, every landmark visible, even in the dim moonlight, filtering through the autumn canopy. They had been moving for perhaps 20 minutes when they heard the first shouts behind them, flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. The search had expanded to the woods. "They'll have thermal imaging," Olivia realized. "We can't outrun that technology." Walter nodded grimly. "But we can outsmart it. Follow me." He led her to a small stream, its water icy cold as they waded in. "The water will mask our heat signatures," he explained, "and mask our scent from tracking dogs." They followed the stream for half a mile, the cold water numbing Olivia's feet through her work boots. Finally, Walter guided her up the bank and into a dense thicket of evergreens. "Old Hunter's blind," he said, pointing to a crude wooden platform built into the branches of a massive oak tree. "Aaron and I built it when he was 15. Nathan never knew about it." The climb was difficult for Walter, his arthritic hands struggling with each grip, but determination drove him upward. Once on the platform, they lay flat, making themselves as small as possible, as search teams combed the woods below. Twice, searchers passed directly beneath their hiding place, powerful flashlights sweeping the forest floor. The thermal imaging equipment they carried would have detected them easily had they not taken the precaution with the stream. Hours passed, the search gradually moving farther away. When the forest had been silent for over an hour, Walter finally spoke. "We need to keep moving. The Marshall farm is still 2 miles northeast." Dawn was breaking as they finally reached the edge of the Marshall property, a working dairy farm with outbuildings and silos visible in the distance. They approached cautiously, alert for any sign that Nathan's team had preceded them. The farmhouse was quiet, a single light burning in the kitchen window. Walter led them to the back door and knocked softly. After a moment, the porch light came on, and a woman's voice called out, "Who's there?" "Martha, it's Walter Thompson. We need help." The door opened to reveal a woman in her 60s, gray hair pulled back in a practical bun expression, shifting from wariness to concern as she took in their bedraggled appearance. "Walter, good Lord, what happened to you?" "Men came to my farm," Walter explained simply. "Armed men. Victor's been taken. We need to call the authorities." Martha Marshall ushered them inside without further questions. "Frank," she called to her husband, "call the sheriff and bring down the shotgun." Inside the warm kitchen, Martha provided towels and blankets while Frank made the call. Olivia sank gratefully into a chair, her muscles trembling with exhaustion and cold. "Sheriff says he's sending cars," Frank reported, hanging up the landline. "Says there's already some kind of situation at your place, Walter. Federal agents called it in about an hour ago." "Rachel," Olivia breathed. "She must have sent backup when she couldn't reach Agent Davis." Walter nodded, relief washing over his weathered features. "Let's hope they got there in time for Victor." But their relief was short-lived. Through the kitchen window, they saw headlights approaching the farm, multiple vehicles moving with purpose. "Get down," Frank ordered, reaching for his shotgun. "Martha, take them to the root cellar." "No," Walter said firmly. "We're done running. If that's Nathan and his men, they'll just hurt anyone who helps us." He moved to the window, peering cautiously through the curtains. Then his shoulders relaxed. "It's okay," he announced. "Those are federal vehicles. I recognize the markings." Minutes later, the kitchen was filled with federal agents, Rachel Lawson among them. Her normally composed face showed signs of strain and urgency. "Thank God," she said when she saw them. "We've been searching for you since midnight." "Victor," Walter said immediately. "They took him." Rachel's expression tightened. "We know. Agent Davis managed to get a distress call out before he was shot. He's in surgery now, but expected to recover." "And Victor?" Olivia asked, dreading the answer. "We don't know yet," Rachel admitted. "When our team reached your farm, they found signs of a struggle, blood in the cellar, but no Victor Mason. The place had been abandoned." "Nathan was there," Walter told her, "running the operation personally. We saw them take Victor." Rachel nodded grimly. "That matches what we've pieced together. Nathan Thompson has gone off the grid. His office claims he's on vacation, but his home is empty and his passport hasn't been used." He knows we have everything, Olivia realized. All the evidence Aaron gathered. He's running. Not for long, Rachel promised. We've already executed warrants at Atlas Security Headquarters. Computers seized records, confiscated executives being questioned. The whole operation is coming down. But without Nathan, without a confession, Walter began. We don't need him, Rachel assured him. The evidence you gathered is more than enough. Nathan Thompson is just one piece of a much larger conspiracy. And now that we know he was personally involved in the assault on your farm, we've added new charges: attempted murder of federal officers, kidnapping, conspiracy. Every law enforcement agency in the country will be looking for him. Walter seemed to age before their eyes, the adrenaline that had kept him going through the night finally ebbing away. 20 years, he murmured. 20 years I believed my boy killed himself, that I had somehow failed him. Rachel placed a hand on his shoulder. Your son was a hero, Mr. Thompson. He gave his life trying to expose corruption that cost other American lives. When this is all over, he'll receive the recognition he deserves. The next few hours passed in a blur of statements and debriefings. The evidence bag, which Walter had protected through their nighttime ordeal, was officially logged and secured. Federal technicians arrived to process digital copies of everything, ensuring the chain of evidence remained unbroken. By mid-afternoon, word came that Victor had been found abandoned at a truck stop 50 miles away, beaten but alive. He was being transported to the same hospital as Agent Davis. Nathan must have realized we had him on tape planning Aaron's murder, Rachel theorized. He knows his only play now is to disappear. Leaving witnesses alive would be sloppy draw, too much attention. So what happens now? Olivia asked. Now you both get some rest, Rachel instructed. You've done your part, let us do ours. They were provided accommodations at a hotel in town under guard by federal marshals. Walter, despite his exhaustion, couldn't settle. He paced the small room, checking his phone constantly for updates. I need to see Victor, he said finally. I need to know he's okay. Rachel arranged for them to visit the hospital that evening. Victor was in a private room, his face bruised, one arm in a cast, but his eyes alert and determined. Thought you might have ended up in a ditch somewhere, he greeted them with grim humor. Walter clasped his friend's good hand. Thanks to you, we made it. Victor shook his head. Thanks to Aaron. He's the one who left us the breadcrumbs to follow. Smart kid just like his old man. Victor recounted what had happened after they escaped through the coal chute. He had managed to wound one of the attackers before being overwhelmed. Nathan had interrogated him personally, demanding to know where Walter and Olivia had gone and what evidence they had found. I fed him some story about another safety deposit box in Pittsburgh, Victor said with satisfaction. Had him convinced that's where you were headed. Bought you some time? They could have killed you, Olivia said quietly. Victor's expression turned serious. They were going to. Had me in the trunk, pulled over at that truck stop. Nathan was arguing with his team leader something about unnecessary bodies and too much exposure. They were distracted enough that I managed to get out of my restraints. Made enough noise that some passing truckers noticed. Nathan and his team took off rather than create a scene. Walter's phone rang Rachel Lawson with an update. As he spoke with her, his expression shifted from attention to shock. What is it? Olivia asked when he hung up. They found Nathan, Walter said, his voice hollow. Dead in a hotel room in Buffalo. Single gunshot wound to the head. They're calling it suicide. The symmetry was both ironic and tragic, Nathan dying the same way Aaron had a bullet to the head ruled as self-inflicted. But unlike Aaron, Nathan's death truly appeared to be suicide. A handwritten note had been found confessing to his role in weapons trafficking in Aaron's murder, but implicating others higher up the chain. Convenient, Victor commented bitterly. The fall guy takes himself out, protecting whoever was really calling the shots. Rachel says they found a laptop in the hotel room, Walter added, encrypted files that their tech team is working on, and contact information for offshore accounts. Nathan may have left them more evidence than his bosses realized. 3 days later, they returned to Walter's farm. Federal investigators had completed their work, leaving behind the inevitable disruption of a crime scene. Bullet holes scarred the walls, furniture overturned the cellar door, hanging from broken hinges. But the barn remained untouched. The Ford F-100 sat patiently where they had left it, partially disassembled, but waiting to be reborn. Back to work, Olivia suggested, seeing how Walter's eyes lingered on the truck. He nodded, a slight smile touching his lips. Aaron would want us to finish what we started. The restoration took on new meaning now. It wasn't just about bringing an old truck back to life. It was about honoring Aaron's memory, completing the project that father and son had planned to do together. Victor joined them when he was released from the hospital, his mechanical expertise proving invaluable despite his injured arm. Helen visited regularly, bringing food and updates on the federal investigation that was now making national headlines. Atlas Securities operations were being dismantled, executives arrested, government contracts canceled. General Phillips had been taken into custody, along with 3 other high-ranking military officers implicated in Aaron's evidence. The weapons trafficking network that had armed both sides of the Iraq conflict was exposed, leading to congressional hearings and promises of oversight reform. And Aaron Thompson's official cause of death had been changed from suicide to homicide in the line of duty. His name would be added to a memorial for intelligence officers who had died serving their country. "It won't bring him back," Walter acknowledged one evening as they finished installing the rebuilt engine. "But at least now everyone knows the truth. What he found, what he died for, it mattered." The Ford F-100 gradually transformed under their careful attention. The rusted body panels were repaired or replaced, the frame straightened, the drivetrain rebuilt to original specifications. Walter insisted on keeping the hidden compartments Aaron had created, though they would remain empty now. They were part of the truck's history, part of its soul. 6 months after they had begun, the restoration was complete. The truck gleamed in the spring sunshine, its blue paint restored to the vibrant shade Walter's father had chosen in 1955. The chrome trim sparkled, the upholstery had been faithfully recreated, and the straight 6 engine purred with a smooth, powerful cadence that spoke of American engineering at its finest. "She's beautiful," Olivia said, running her hand along the fender. "Your father would be proud. Aaron, too." Walter nodded, emotion making speech difficult. He opened the driver's door and settled behind the wheel, his hands gripping the same steering wheel his father had held, that he had held as a young man, that Aaron had hoped to hold one day. "Take her for a drive," Olivia suggested. Walter hesitated, then nodded. Aaron would want that. Victor and Olivia watched as Walter started the engine, the sound filling the barn with memories and promise. He backed carefully out into the sunlight, the truck moving smoothly after decades of stillness. "He'll be okay," Victor said quietly, watching his friend drive slowly down the lane. "Not the same, but okay." "And you?" Olivia asked. Victor's injuries had healed, but the trauma of that night had left its mark on all of them. He shrugged. "One day at a time. That's how we got through Vietnam. That's how we'll get through this." Rachel Lawson arrived as Walter was returning from his drive, a thick folder under her arm, and a satisfied expression on her face. "Good news?" Victor asked as they all gathered in the kitchen. Rachel nodded. "The best. Nathan's laptop contained everything we needed to connect the final dots. Detailed records of every illegal weapons transfer, every bribe paid, every official compromised. The entire network is exposed." She opened the folder, revealing official documents bearing the Department of Justice letterhead. "There's more. Nathan's offshore accounts contained nearly $30 million proceeds from the weapons trafficking operation. The court has ordered it seized and held in trust." "Trust?" Walter asked, confusion evident in his voice. Rachel smiled. "For the families of American soldiers killed by the very weapons Atlas diverted to insurgents, and for whistleblowers like Aaron, who lost their lives trying to expose the truth." She slid a document across the table toward Walter. "As Aaron's next of kin, you're entitled to a significant portion of those funds. The government recognizes that no amount of money can replace your son, but it's a small measure of justice." Walter stared at the document, overwhelmed by its implications. "I don't need money." "Then use it how Aaron would want," Rachel suggested gently. "He died trying to protect his fellow soldiers. Perhaps this can help those who made it home." In the weeks that followed, Walter did exactly that. With Olivia and Victor's help, he established the Aaron Thompson Foundation for Veterans, a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing practical support for returning soldiers. Job training, housing assistance, mental health services, all the things Aaron had seen his fellow veterans struggle with after coming home. The Foundation's first project was the restoration of military vehicles, providing meaningful work for veterans while teaching them marketable skills. The garage space was donated by Olivia, who had purchased Mitchell's auto shop when Martin finally retired. And at the center of it all sat the blue Ford F-100, a symbol of persistence and truth that had survived decades of neglect to emerge stronger than before. Walter kept it in the barn, but drove it regularly to veterans events, to foundation fundraisers, and sometimes just along the country roads where he had once taught Aaron to drive. On the anniversary of Aaron's death, now recognized as the anniversary of his sacrifice, Walter drove the truck to Oakwood Cemetery. Olivia and Victor accompanied him along with Helen and a dozen veterans who had found purpose through the foundation. They gathered at Aaron's grave, recently updated with a new headstone that correctly identified him as having died in service to his country. Walter placed a small model of the Ford F-100 on the grave marker, a symbol of the connection between father and son that not even death could sever. 20 years ago, I lost my son, Walter said, addressing the small gathering. For 20 years, I believed I had somehow failed him, that his death was a result of demons I couldn't help him fight. Now I know the truth. Aaron didn't die from despair. He died because he refused to look away from corruption and injustice. He died standing up for what was right. Walter rested his hand on the truck's fender, drawing strength from the solid presence of the vehicle that had carried 3 generations of Thompson men. This truck was supposed to be a project we worked on together, a way for father and son to connect through the language of engines and tools. Instead, it became the vessel that carried the truth about Aaron's death, patiently waiting all these years for someone to listen to its story. He looked at Olivia with gratitude. Sometimes the people who help us heal come from unexpected places. Sometimes the skills we need aren't taught in universities, but passed down through generations of practical knowledge. Sometimes the most important restoration isn't of metal and chrome, but of truth and justice. The afternoon sun glinted off the truck's blue paint as Walter finished speaking. In that moment, Olivia could almost see Aaron Thompson not as a photograph or a memory, but as a presence that lived on in his father's determination, in the foundation that bore his name, and in the truth that had finally emerged after 2 decades of darkness. The Ford F-100 had been more than just a restoration project. It had been a repository of secrets, a keeper of evidence, a link between father and son across the divide of death. Its engine might be mechanical, but its soul carried the imprint of every hand that had touched it, every life connected to its journey. As they drove back to the farm, Walter at the wheel of the truck he had inherited from his father and had once hoped to pass to his son Olivia reflected on her grandfather's wisdom. Machines do have souls carrying the imprints of those who love them. This particular machine had carried a father's grief, a son's determination, and ultimately the truth that had set them both free. The road ahead stretched into the distance, winding through hills that had witnessed generations come and go. The Ford F-100 moved steadily forward, its restored heart beating a rhythm of resilience and renewal. Like the truth it had helped uncover, it had endured darkness and neglect only to emerge stronger and more vital than before. For Olivia Barrett, the journey had transformed her as surely as she had transformed the truck. She had come to Riverdale seeking simply to fix machines, to restore what was broken. Instead, she had found herself involved in restoring something far more precious: truth, justice, and a father's peace of mind. As the truck crested a hill, the setting sun bathed everything in golden light, the perfect metaphor for illumination after years of shadow. Walter drove with quiet confidence, his hands steady on the wheel that connected him to his father before him and the son he had lost. Victor and Helen followed in Victor's pickup, the 4 of them bound together by a quest that had changed all their lives. Some restorations take time, years, even decades. But in the end, quality craftsmanship endures, whether in vehicles or in human character. The truck that had once been a symbol of loss now stood as a testament to perseverance, to the enduring power of truth, and to the unexpected connections that can form when people unite around a common purpose. Olivia had come to Walter Thompson's farm as a mechanic looking for work. She would remain as something more, a keeper of stories, a restorer of what time and malice had broken, and a living link in a chain of justice that had begun with a young soldier's courage and ended with the vindication of his sacrifice. The Ford F-100 would continue to serve as a reminder that sometimes the most important things we fix aren't made of metal and rubber, but of truth and memory. Some machines carry more than just passengers and cargo. They carry our stories, our connections, our legacies, and sometimes they carry justice patiently waiting for the right hands to uncover it.